Hello, and welcome to the From Center Ice Happy Hour. That's right, I am back. If you are new here or aren't aware of what the Happy Hour is, it's a 1 hour long podcast episode on Friday evenings to finish out your week and talk about some hockey. And I know it's September 16th, but hockey's right around the corner. We have the Tom Curvers Prospect Showcase this weekend in Chicago with the Chicago Blackhawks and Minnesota Wild prospects facing off against each other. And I know there are many rookie showcases going on around the entire league. And don't blink, but training camp's open next week. Yeah. That gave me a mild panic when I realized that too. It feels like the hockey season just ended with the Colorado Avalanche hoisting the Stanley Cup, and now we are right back into it. But like I said, welcome to the From Center Ice Happy Hour. I have a nice can of Pride wine here. It is my last can of it. It got me through June and through the playoffs and other happy hours. So I figured, since I am now back because the off-season is over and I have awoken from my summer slumber, it's hard to say, I would bring out my last can of this wine here. But to enjoy the From Center Ice Happy Hour, you do not have to drink an alcoholic beverage. You can enjoy whatever you want to. I'm not here to judge, that's for sure. But how has your summer and off-season been? Have you done anything fun? Did it go really fast for you like it did for me? Did it go super slow? We had some hockey sprinkled in here and there during the summer. There was the rescheduled World Juniors. There was the Women's World Championships. Is that what it was? Women's, yeah. And of course, Canada beat the US. So there is always that. But that Canadian women's team is just an absolute wagon right now. And the US kept up with them. They just couldn't get it in the end. So we've had some hockey sprinkled in here and there. There was also the new 3 ice tournament, which is a 3-on-3 tournament league. I didn't get to watch any of it this summer, hoping to tune in if they do it again, and from everything I heard, it was pretty successful. So hopefully they do bring that back next summer. I think that's what they're planning on doing, so I look forward to catching some of it then. It was just a whirlwind of an off-season this year. I went back and forth to New York City a couple times. I did finally get to go up north to the cabin, spend a week up there with my dad, got some fishing in, you know, the typical hockey off-season stuff. So I've had a pretty good time. I've been pretty shut off from the hockey world, though. I needed to just reset my brain. There was a lot going on last season and throughout the playoffs, and during this off-season, it was pretty hard to keep up. I realized I just needed a break, so I haven't really been on Twitter a whole lot. I haven't been on any social media a whole lot. I've gotten a few highlights here and there of different headlines in the news, but I haven't been around all too much. So now it is officially time to just jump completely back into it, get all caught up on what's been going on in the hockey world, and be around to talk to you guys, talk about the rookie showcase going on this weekend. Like I mentioned, the first scrimmage is tonight, Friday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. That will be streamed on Blackhawks.com. And the second and final game is on Sunday at 1 p.m. Central Time. That will also be streamed on Blackhawks.com. So if you want to get your hockey fix and watch the prospects, see what the kids are up to, how they are playing, you know, before they head off to their junior leagues or to the Ice Hogs, tune in for those games because, as we all know, the youth is going to be very important since the Blackhawks are in this rebuild. So I thought with this first episode of the From Center Ice happy hour coming back from the extended break in the offseason, I would use it as a sort of catch-up episode to go over some of the bigger headlines from the hockey world this offseason, talk about some of the big trades that happened, some of the big signings, some interesting signings that weren't necessarily huge, but, intrigued my brain, at least. And then, of course, some Blackhawks news, because that's majority of what is on this channel is Blackhawks. There is some Toronto Maple Leafs sprinkled in there as well, some Rockford Ice Hogs, and of course, talk about the entire league. So let's just start with some NHL news, and before I do that, I'm going to take a sip of my drink here. All right. This isn't necessarily in chronological order of when it all happened. I tried to keep it somewhat in order, but I also kind of tried to group it in terms of what the news was about. So first up, the New York Rangers have a captain this season. Jacob Trouba was named the 28th captain in franchise history, and there were some interesting takes here and there about that. Of course, Jacob Trouba, not necessarily considered the cleanest player in the league. He had some really rough head hits last year. Bringing it back home here to Chicago, he knocked out Jujhar Khaira, who of course had to be stretchered off the ice. That was a really scary incident. But I believe the Rangers players voted on who should be captain, and they chose Jacob Trouba. So we just have to roll forward with that news and hope that nobody gets injured this season. He is a really good player when he's just, playing defense and not throwing elbows around and such. So hopefully he can tone that part down a little bit. Maybe with the responsibility of being named the captain, he will. He's always going to play with an edge because that's his game. Let's just hope for no more injuries here. And going down to Carolina, who the Rangers beat in the playoffs this past offseason, they are turning to their black jerseys to be their primary home jerseys. And I applaud that decision because those black jerseys are beautiful, and I really appreciate them doing that. I might have to pick one up myself, maybe a Teuvo Teravainen, since he is a former Blackhawk, or Antti Ranta, of course, also a former Blackhawk. But if I was going to choose somebody not connected to my home franchise here, I'd probably go with either Jacob Slavin. Well, I guess he is sort of tied to my home franchise since we have his brother Josiah, but I liked him before we got Josiah here in Chicago. Or Seth Jarvis, because that kid is just a phenomenal hockey player, and I can't wait to see how he progresses this coming season. And along with the black jerseys becoming their primary home jerseys, they released a new red alternate sweater, so you can go ahead and look that up if you are interested in seeing that. Sticking with the jersey news, not New Jersey, but New Jerseys. Oh, that gets so confusing, doesn't it? Like when the Devils had the jersey, I still want one of those. I haven't gotten one yet. I went to the NHL store in New York City this summer, and I was so close to buying one, but I didn't. One of these days, I will get myself a jersey. But we go out west. The San Jose Sharks unveiled a new quote-unquote Evolve jersey, and it throws back to their original pattern with the stripes, except the new jersey is teal instead of the gray like they had before, and it has the updated logos and all of that. Looking at the pictures online, it looked very, very sharp and very sweet. I can't wait to see it in game action. It's going to be interesting if they decide to wear it against the Seattle Kraken. I'm not sure if they're going to be their permanent jerseys or if they're more of an alternate. I didn't read that much into it. But if they are their permanent ones, or if they're alternates and they choose to wear them against Seattle, and that'll be interesting because they're kind of bright along the lines of the Seattle sweaters, but of course, their colors are different. So it'll just look like kind of an intra-squad game out there, just slightly different. But they look very, very nice. I might have to get myself one of those too. But I'm going to have to look at the San Jose Sharks roster, because at this point, I don't even know who's still there. Maybe a James Reimer jersey. He's still in San Jose, isn't he? Gotta love Rhymes. Gotta love him. And then we go from good news about new hockey sweaters. We'll go with sweater, even though they're not necessarily sweaters anymore. It's just less confusing than new jersey and new jerseys. Anyway, moving on from the new sweater news, unfortunately we dive into injuries, and Max Pacioretty is out for 6 months after getting surgery on his torn Achilles, which just sounds horribly painful and horrendous. Ugh. But he got it fixed, and he's out for 6 months, so if everything goes well, that should bring him back around February. Of course, we know hockey players usually try to come back sooner than their projected dates, but let's just say around February. And he is with a new team, but we are not to the trades and signings yet, but he is no longer with the Vegas Golden Knights. If you have kept up with the news, you know where I'm going with that, but we will get there. I am not there yet. Also along those injury lines, and with ties to the Vegas Golden Knights, Robin Lehner. Oh, bless the guy. He really cannot catch a break, but he is out for the 2022-23 season after having hip surgery. So he is done for the year, and that's just so unfortunate for the guy. I hope that he recovers well from the surgery and the rehab for that goes well, and he can get back into playing shape and come back next season. That's just such a blow for him. But in net for the Vegas Golden Knights, Logan Thompson is going to start the season as their number 1 goalie. And last year he had a record of 10-5-3 with a .914 save percentage and a 2.68 goals against average. And what I remember most from his season last year, unfortunately for the kid, is how many shootouts he had to face at the end of the season as Vegas was trying to claw their way into a playoff spot. Of course, they missed out, and the Blackhawks put that final dagger in them by beating them in a shootout. Of course, Dallas also won that night, so it wouldn't have really mattered either way, but just give me this. It's been a rough time here in Chicago. I just need this. But it was definitely not Thompson's fault, obviously. The Vegas Golden Knights lost so many man games to injury last year. It was ridiculous. And now Robin Lehner is out for the entire year. So we'll see what Logan Thompson can do. Not necessarily an injury per se, but Alexander Texier will not be playing for the Columbus Blue Jackets this season. He is going to play over in Europe. He took a leave of absence from the team last year in March after sustaining an injury, and he put out a statement a few weeks ago saying, "During the past year, I have experienced some personal issues and challenges, and I feel I need to be close to my family at this time. I have love and respect for the city of Columbus, the Blue Jackets, and the fans, as everyone has always treated me first class. I truly appreciate the support, help, and empathy I have received from team management, the coaching staff, doctors, trainers, and my teammates. This was a hard decision, but is the best one for me right now." So I don't really have much else to say about that other than I'm hoping the best for Texier, and I hope this year away and this year closer to his family is good for him to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, whichever way he needs to. And hopefully he feels good enough to come back to the NHL next season. He's a very promising young player, and of course that doesn't matter as much as his well-being. So I just hope the best for him and that he has a positive year away from the NHL. And kudos to the Columbus Blue Jackets for helping him with this decision and supporting him along the way there. Going up to Canada with some very unfortunate news. The Montreal general manager, Kent Hughes, said that Carey Price might miss the entire season because of a knee injury. He said the news about the injury was not good, and he doubts that Price could come back to play without having surgery. He said it doesn't look like rehab on it will be enough. So that might be another great goaltender out for the entire season because of injury. And you just really have to feel for the guy. Of course, he didn't play the majority of last season. He entered the substance abuse program for players and spoke out about his mental health, which was wonderful. And I'm glad he was strong enough to do that. And I'm sure it helped different players around the league or fans of the Canadiens or of hockey in general. A guy that big like Carey Price coming out and talking about it really moves us in the right direction of making it a more normal topic to talk about and discuss. But of course, I wouldn't be applauding that if he didn't feel he was in a better position. And I feel like he was, just because he was able to come out and talk about it later in the year. He did suit up for a game or a couple of games, but now he might be out for the entire 22-23 season. So that is very unfortunate for him. They have Jake Allen, they re-signed Samuel Montembeault, and Caden Primo, I think, signed with the Habs. Maybe he signed somewhere else. Washington, maybe? So never mind on Primo there. But they have Jake Allen and Samuel Montembeault, and I guess they're just going to try to take over the net there in Montreal. Should be an interesting season for them up there in Canada, but I hope the best for Carey Price. I hope that he is either able to rehab it back to being in game shape if he comes back to play. If this is the end of his career, I hope he's able to just rehab it to get back to having a good quality of life with the injury. Or if he goes the surgery route, I hope that goes well and the healing on that goes well. That said, I'm going to take another sip here. And I know if you're watching the video version of this on YouTube, which you can do at youtube.com/c/FromCenterIce, you would know I am taking a sip. I say that just for the people listening to the audio version, so it's not just random dead air mixed in here. But moving on, we go down to Boston, and they have some injuries as well. They are starting the season without Brad Marchand, Matt Grzelcyk, and Charlie McAvoy. Grzelcyk is expected to be back in November. The other two are expected to be back in December. So it's going to be a rough start to the season for the Boston Bruins, but if we know anything about the Bruins, it's that they always figure out time and time again how to be good. So I would assume nothing less here than they will figure it out and tread water until they get those three back. In happier news, we go back up to Canada, and Montreal Canadiens have a captain. They named Nick Suzuki the 31st captain in team history. He is also the youngest captain in team history at 23 years old. The second youngest was Silvio Mantha, who was 24 when named captain, heading into the 1926-27 season. And to give you some context there, the Chicago Blackhawks became a team in 1926. So that was a while ago. That was almost 100 years ago, if you can imagine that. So Shea Weber was the previous captain of the Montreal Canadiens. His contract was traded to the Vegas Golden Knights for Evgeny Dadonov, who they were finally able to trade after they tried to trade him at the trade deadline to the Anaheim Ducks, and that wasn't able to go through because they were on his no-trade list, which Vegas did not bother to look at, apparently, and the league shut it down. So they were finally able to trade him away to the Montreal Canadiens for Shea Weber's contract because he is medically retired and will not be playing anymore. So the Habs now have a captain, Nick Suzuki. He's entering, I believe, the first year of an 8-year contract, so some stability there in the captain category. So good for Nick. I hope it goes well. Hopefully they have a better season than they did last year. Of course, they'll have a full year of Martin St. Louis as their head coach, instead of kind of being in limbo there, with Ducharme being let go, St. Louis being named the interim head coach. Now he's the full-time head coach, and we'll see how it goes. In other captain news, this just dropped today. In Winnipeg, Blake Wheeler has been stripped of the captaincy for the Jets. They are not going to have a captain this year. Of course, the Jets hired a new head coach this offseason in Rick Bowness, and he said he wanted to spread around the leadership responsibilities, so it wasn't just all on one guy. We'll see how that goes. Blake seemed to take it pretty well, at least publicly, with what he said to the media today, but he has been captain since the 2016-17 season, so I'm sure that's kind of a blow to him a bit, and a little surprising if nothing else, but it's better than being stripped of the captaincy out of nowhere and it being given to somebody else by a brand new head coach who hasn't been there at all. Maybe he gets the captaincy back after Bowness has a full season with the team. Maybe he gives it to somebody else. We'll just have to wait and see. But he said he wanted to spread around the leadership responsibilities. It's interesting, but we'll see how it goes. If you are a Jets fan, I'm very curious to know how you feel about that. In non-player news, David Poile celebrates 40 years as an NHL GM this year. He was named the general manager of the Washington Capitals on August 30th, 1982, and then he became the GM of the then expansion team, Nashville Predators, in 1997. And he is still the general manager of the Nashville Predators. It has been 25 years. He is obviously the longest tenured GM, and I thought that was just incredible reading those numbers. He has been the GM of the Predators for 25 years. That's just unheard of. But congrats to Poile, and we'll see how long he sticks around. See if he can make it to 50 years as an NHL GM. I'm sure he can. And we'll see if it's still with the Predators. In retirement news, Matthew Perreault has announced his retirement after 13 seasons in the NHL. He had 708 regular season games and 352 points. He spent parts of his career with the Capitals, the Ducks, the Jets, and finally the Montreal Canadiens. And he missed most of last season due to an injury. When I think of Matthew Perreault, I envision him on the Jets. He was there for a while. That may be what he is most known for, but he's retiring after 13 seasons. So good luck to you, Matthew Perreault. I hope you enjoy your retired life and everything goes well for you. I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in hockey at some point. So we'll just see how that goes. And in other retirement news, and bringing it back home here to Chicago, the Chicago Blackhawks are retiring Marian Hossa's number 81 jersey on November 20th when they take on the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I'm just so happy about that. Of course, there were some people who were skeptical about the decision, saying that he didn't even spend the majority of his career in Chicago, blah, blah, blah. But he was part of all 3 Cup wins and a big part of all 3 Cup wins. Maybe the best free agency signing in Chicago sports history. And if you think back to those successful teams that the Blackhawks had, there was maybe no more important player than Marian Hossa, which is saying a lot for a team who had Patrick Kane, Duncan Keith, Jonathan Toews, Brent Seabrook, Nicholas Hjalmarsson, all of those guys. But Marian Hossa is just a level above everybody with how he impacted the game and impacted the franchise of the Chicago Blackhawks. So I am so happy to see his number 81 going to the rafters. He definitely deserves it for the impact he had on Chicago sports, on Chicago Blackhawks, and of course, helping to bring those 3 cups back to the Windy City. I definitely believe they wouldn't have won any of the 3 without him, and once he left, that's when things took a very steep turn downward. You just can't get better than Marian Hossa. Such a classy guy off the ice, and when it comes to his play on the ice, his work ethic is pretty much unrivaled. So number 81 is going to the rafters. November 20th, 2022 is going to be a special night, and I'm glad it's against one of his former teams in the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's pretty cool. Too bad they couldn't do it versus the Ottawa Senators, where he started his career, but it's against the Penguins, and they have a lot of love for Marian Hossa over there. So I think that's awesome, and I am happy that the Blackhawks are doing that. In other former Blackhawks news and former Blackhawks Cup winner news, Scott Darling has a brand new career. Since his retirement from the NHL, we haven't heard a lot from Scotty, but he is now doing stand-up comedy. So that's new. I haven't read about any other former players going on to be a stand-up comedian, but Scotty is doing that. Let me take a sip there. It started with him going to a show at the Laugh Factory in Chicago, and now he's been on a little bit of a tour opening for another comedian. I didn't take down the name, I'm sorry. My notes are lacking here, but he did some shows in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is also nice because he did play for the Carolina Hurricanes. So that is a good place for him to get in some shows as well. But he said, I briefly read part of the article about him going into comedy. I plan on reading the full thing later after I record this, but he was talking about how he was dealing with depression after retiring from the NHL because his life had been hockey, and of course he had his own personal struggles as well, which we all saw highlighted while he was a player and rebounding his career here in Chicago before the Cup win, which the Blackhawks probably wouldn't have won the Cup in 2015 without Scott Darling. But he was suffering with depression after retirement, and then he got into comedy, and I think that's wonderful. I'm a big fan of stand-up comedy myself. I hope that if he comes back around the Chicago area, I can go see one of his shows, or some of it makes it online at some point. I'd be happy to watch that. But congrats to Scotty Darling. I wish the absolute best for him. He's a fantastic guy and a hometown kid here in Northern Illinois from Lamont. And he's just a guy that you want to root for, and a guy who is easy to root for. And the city of Chicago will forever love him for his relief performance in that first round against the Nashville Predators in 2015. So congrats to Scotty. I hope the comedy goes wonderfully for you, and I hope to catch a show sometime. So let's move on to some more feel-good news here. Nazem Kadri has donated $1 million to Ontario's London Health Sciences Centre, and the surgical centre has been renamed the Nazem Kadri Surgical Centre. So that's great. More money being put into the healthcare system, which has taken an absolute beating these last few years because of COVID. So it's great to see Naz reaching out and appreciating the healthcare workers and donating $1 million to the center and having the surgical center renamed after him. I think that's awesome. Good on Naz. We saw PK Subban doing the same thing with the Children's Hospital in Montreal. And it's just nice when players who make a ton of money are able to give back like that. It's really nice to see them putting that money into the community and putting it into good things for the community, like healthcare, because we all need it. That's for sure. So good on Naz. And some more feel-good news here. Not related to an NHL player, but relating to Jack Jablonski. So he is most known for becoming paralyzed in an accident in a high school hockey game over 10 years ago now, which is just mind-blowing to me that it was so long ago. But he had a big social media presence after that happened, trying to regain feeling after he was paralyzed from the chest down. The entire hockey world was rooting for him, and so I was happy to see his name back in the news for a good reason. He is now a digital media content specialist for the LA Kings, and recently he came out as gay. So he credited Luke Prokop with being a huge influence on him. Of course, Luke Prokop became the first NHL player under contract to come out as gay. He is a prospect for the Nashville Predators, and Jack had reached out to him, asked him a bunch of questions. Luke talked about his experience and how the Nashville Predators accepted him and treated him really well, and that encouraged him to be able to come out as gay and live his true life. And then the LA Kings released a statement, again, because he works for them in digital content, and they said, "We are proud of Jack and impressed by the courage he displays, an inspiration to everyone in our organization. Inclusivity, equality, and diversity are embraced in our workplace and our community. Jack's announcement is celebrated by our club, and we support him unconditionally." So I love to see that. Of course, there is only one out gay player under contract, that being Luke Prokop. We don't know if there are other players who aren't out yet, but if there are, and the statistics would suggest that there potentially are, not saying probably because we don't know, but hopefully this topic being normalized and celebrated by the NHL teams and organizations and players, it allows players who maybe are struggling to come out. Hopefully it gives them a safe space to do so, knowing they will be accepted in their locker rooms and not shunned or made fun of. We saw that with Luke Prokop with the Edmonton Oil Kings, how they treated him so wonderfully. Blackhawks prospect Jalen Lipin was on his team. He put pride tape on his stick to support him, and they just appreciated Luke for the fantastic hockey player that he is, and he was the captain of that Edmonton team. And that's how it should be. He shouldn't be the gay player. He should be the awesome defenseman who happens to be gay. And the more we are able to have this conversation and talk about it like that, that's how it will be. It won't always be huge news when somebody comes out. It'll just be like, oh, cool, that's great. And then you celebrate them for being able to be their true selves, and then you move on. And that's really how it should be, because it doesn't affect anybody except them or people who look up to them, who now also feel comfortable because of that representation. So since I have my pride wine here, and since From Center Ice is an LGBTQIA+ run podcast, cheers to Jack, cheers to Luke Prokop, cheers to any hockey fans who are out and proud, cheers to any hockey fans who are still in the closet, they don't quite feel comfortable to come out, that is okay. It is on your terms. It is when you are comfortable doing so. Cheers to any hockey players who are still in the closet. Again, everything is on your terms. Come out when you feel comfortable, when it is safe to do so. Just know that here at From Center Ice, we are always cheering for you. And if you ever need somebody to talk to, we are here. We will listen. Our DMs are open across social media, on Twitter, on Instagram. You can message us on Facebook. It's all open if you ever need to talk about it. But cheers to you guys. And for anybody who still questions why we need Pride nights or hockey is for everyone nights in the NHL or the American Hockey League or any league, just go into the comment section anytime a team posts something about it, especially during June, during Pride Month, and you will see why we still need nights like this. It's not for the people not in the community. It is for people who are in the LGBTQIA plus community, and to feel represented and to feel included and accepted and to really normalize the conversation around it. So that is why we still need it. I'm not here to argue that point with anybody, but I feel like all of our viewers and listeners here at From Center Ice are really, really quality people and won't question that. So I'm just preaching to the choir here with that. But let's go and move on to what has happened this offseason when it comes to player movement or re-signings. But we will start with the big trades that happened, because I don't know about you, but like I said to open up this podcast, I have been pretty disconnected from the hockey world during the off-season. I just needed a mental break from it all so I could really gear up and fully get back into it for the start of the 22-23 season, which is very quickly approaching. Like I said, training camps open next week, not to stress anybody out or anything, but they do. So some of these trades and or signings I totally forgot about. So if I forgot about them, I figured maybe some of you did as well. So I laid out some of the bigger ones here, ones that I thought were most interesting. These trades and signings that I am about to talk about don't encompass everything that happened this offseason. So if I don't mention your favorite player or your favorite team, I am sorry. I did not include every single move that was made, because this podcast would be about 4 hours long, because this offseason was pure madness. But I laid out some of the bigger ones. So the first one I have here is Kevin Fiala being traded to the Los Angeles Kings by the Minnesota Wild. In return, the Wild got back Brock Faber and a 2022 first-round pick, which became Liam Ogren. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. Brock Faber is playing college hockey in Minnesota, so it's kind of perfect there. And then Kevin Fiala went on to sign a big old deal with the LA Kings. So we'll see how his offense adds to that team. Of course, LA did squeak into the playoffs this year, and they were ultimately taken out by the Edmonton Oilers in 7 games. Unfortunately, I was rooting for LA for once. The one time I root for the Kings and they lose. Whatever. But they needed some more offense, and Fiala will definitely add that to their lineup. So I'm interested to see how that works out for them. The second one, I know we've talked about a bit on other podcasts, but Ryan McDonough, previously of the Tampa Bay Lightning, being traded to the Nashville Predators for Philippe Myers and Grant Mismash. That was just purely a cap move because, of course, Tampa Bay is up close to the cap there, and they needed to move somebody. And Ryan McDonough was that guy. He wasn't the only guy, but he was one of them. We'll talk about others when it comes to some of the signings. Next up, Alexander Georgiev, previously goaltender for the New York Rangers, was traded to the Colorado Avalanche, the reigning Stanley Cup champs, for a 2022 third-round pick, fifth-round pick, and a 2023 third-round pick. So a few picks going back to the Rangers in exchange for Alexander Georgiev, and the Avs seem like they're just going to roll with him and Pavel Francouz as their goaltending tandem. I'm very intrigued to see how this works out for them. They made Darcy Kemper work for them. Of course, Kemper had a fantastic regular season. He was a bit iffy there at times in the playoffs, but you can't knock the guy because he won the Stanley Cup. So we'll see how Georgiev does with the Avalanche. He was well-liked by the Rangers his first year or two there, and then he sort of fell out of favor a little bit, and then he didn't get too much playing time because Igor Shesterkin took over and won the Vezina this year. So you can't argue with their decision there at all. Next up, one that hurts my heart a lot. Alex DeBrincat was traded from the Chicago Blackhawks to the Ottawa Senators for the 7th overall pick this summer, which became Kevin Korchinski, and a second-round pick this year, which was Paul Ludwinski, and a 2024 third-round pick was also added to that deal. I could go on about that deal for a while and say many things about it, but the Blackhawks are in a rebuild. They wanted draft picks, and they figured that DeBrincat would get the best return for them, so they traded him, and it hurts. I don't like it. I understand it, but it really sucks. Ottawa's made some big moves this offseason, though, and it seems like they're going to be a playoff contender. Possibly not a Stanley Cup contender, but a playoff contender. So it would be nice if they were able to get there, and I will definitely be rooting for Cat to have a fantastic season and hopefully be able to watch him in the playoffs. I just hope they never come up against the Toronto Maple Leafs, because I know that would just be pain from every angle. So the next trade has a few different parts here. Alexander Romanov, previously of the Montreal Canadiens, was moved to the New York Islanders along with a 2022 fourth-round pick. In return, Montreal got the 13th overall pick this summer in 2022. They then traded that 13th overall pick to my Chicago Blackhawks for Kirby Dach, along with a third-round pick this year Montreal also sent to Chicago. So with those two picks, the 13th overall pick, Chicago took Frank Nazar, and in the third round, they took Gavin Hayes. Frank seems to be one of the best prospects that Chicago has now, so I definitely can't argue with that. I just really hope that Kirby has a great season with Montreal this year. I think everybody gave up on him way too quickly, and he hasn't really gotten a break in his career so far. So I hope he has a really good year with Montreal, and I will definitely be rooting for him, along with DeBrincat up there in Ottawa, which I hate that both of those guys were traded to Canadian teams, since, of course, my second team is the Toronto Maple Leafs. But it is what it is. And that is a beautiful segue into the next trade, which involves the Chicago Blackhawks and Toronto Maple Leafs, because Toronto sent Peter Mrazek and the 25th overall pick this year, which became Sam Rinzel, to my Blackhawks in exchange for a second-round pick this summer. So basically, Toronto just moved back in the draft in order to get rid of Peter Mrazek's deal and gave Chicago the first round pick in the process. And I would like to go on record saying that I was definitely one of the first people to propose this trade, not the entire trade, but I said months ago that it would make sense for the Blackhawks to get Peter Mrazek from Toronto because they need somebody in net, and Toronto really needed to shed that contract of Mrazek. And guess what happened? So I just want to take credit for that. Anyway, now that I'm done bragging, the next trade I have to talk about also involves a goaltender, and one that a lot of people around the league, when it comes to hockey fans, wanted their team to trade for, and that is Ville Husso. But St. Louis traded Ville Husso's signing rights to the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for a third-round pick this year in 2022. I know many Toronto fans wanted Ville Husso, but he went to the Red Wings, and I'm very intrigued to watch Steve Yzerman's Red Wings next year, because once we get to the signings, we'll see that they made a bunch of big moves this offseason, and they're very intriguing. So, next is another goaltender, and this also comes back around to Toronto, where the Toronto Maple Leafs sent Future Considerations, the most popular player from the 21-22 season, to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for Matt Murray at 25% retained and a 2023 third-round pick and a 7th-round pick in 2024. So Toronto is going to try to make Matt Murray work for them in net. They also picked up Ilya Samsonov in free agency. I didn't mark that down as one of the signings, so I'm just going to say that now, even though we aren't to the signings yet. So their tandem they are rolling out is Matt Murray and Ilya Samsonov, previously of the Washington Capitals. And I'm not really sure how that's going to go. Matt Murray did win 2 cups with the Penguins, and then things seem to go downhill. Hopefully, being with Toronto can, revitalize his career, and we'll just hope for the best. But since Ottawa was able to trade away Matt Murray, they were involved in another goaltender trade, which was acquiring Cam Talbot from the Minnesota Wild in exchange for younger goaltender Philip Gustafsson. So Cam didn't want to play behind Marc-Andre Fleury, so he goes to Ottawa, where he will be the guy, and then younger goaltender Philip Gustafsson will play behind Marc-Andre Fleury in Minnesota. And next up is a trade that my brain totally just wiped out and forgot ever happened while I was making notes for this podcast. And that is Brent Burns with 34% of his salary retained, and Lane Peterson being traded to the Carolina Hurricanes from the San Jose Sharks in exchange for Steven Lawrence's signing rights, Eetu Makiniemi, who was a goaltender for the Chicago Wolves this past season, and a conditional third-round pick next year in 2023. They get the lower of Carolina's 2 third-round picks. And I totally forgot Brent Burns was ever traded. Now he is a Carolina Hurricane, and that is going to be very interesting to watch. They got rid of Tony DeAngelo, who was supposed to provide offense from the back end, which he did, but didn't provide any defense, which we all could have told Carolina. But they replaced him with Brent Burns, who also brings offense from the back end. And they also replaced him with another guy, which brings me to the next trade, which is the Vegas Golden Knights trading Max Pacioretty and Dylan Coghlan to the Carolina Hurricanes for future considerations. That player comes around once again. That dang old future considerations. Obviously, this is a cap move. And of course, Max Pacioretty is going to miss 6 months with that Achilles surgery. But Carolina also gets Dylan Coghlan. And he is a player that I'm glad was traded away from Vegas because I actually like Dylan. And I didn't want to root for him on Vegas or with the Wolves when they were affiliated with Vegas. But he has a bomb of a shot from the blue line. That is what I remember most of him from his time with the Wolves, is whenever they would go on the power play against the Ice Hogs, they would just send that puck over to Coghlan, who would blast the one-timer on net. And he scored quite a few goals that way. He's got a hard, heavy shot, and he will also bring offense from the back end for Carolina. So I look forward to seeing how he does for them. I hope he does well. And in another defenseman swap, we move up to the New Jersey Devils and Pittsburgh Penguins. New Jersey sent Ty Smith and a 2023 third-round pick to Pittsburgh for John Marino. And this trade really confused me. I like Ty Smith. He's still a very young player. I'm not sure why Jersey was willing to give up on him so soon and to also send a third-round pick next year in a very deep draft to Pittsburgh for John Marino. But I guess they are assuming that will upgrade their defense. I'm not really sure there. Of course, the New Jersey Devils are kind of my guilty pleasure team. They are my fun team to watch, if you will. I don't invest my emotions in them like I do with the Blackhawks and the Leafs, but they are a very young team and a fast, skilled team, and they're very fun to watch. So this one was definitely intriguing to me, and I didn't really understand it, so I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out. The next trade was also a cap move, much like the ones made by Vegas, but this time it was a trade from the Columbus Blue Jackets, who sent Oliver Bjorkstrand to the Seattle Kraken for a 2023 third and fourth round pick. I love that for Seattle. He's going to provide some more offense there. And I mean, watching Seattle games this past season, what they really needed was defense and goaltending. But I'm guessing they assume that Philip Grubauer and Chris Drieger and their other goaltenders will have a better season this year than they did in their inaugural season. I can speak words, I promise. So I love that for Seattle, getting some more offense there. And Columbus needed to clear some space for the signings we're going to talk about. But the biggest trade of the offseason happened between the Calgary Flames and the Florida Panthers. And that was Calgary sending Matthew Tkachuk and a 2025 conditional fourth-round pick to the Florida Panthers. And in return, Calgary got Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, prospect Cole Schwindt, and a 2025 lottery-protected first-round pick. They got an absolute haul for Matthew Tkachuk. And Tkachuk signed a big old contract before that trade. It was a sign-and-trade kind of deal. I'll get to that with the signings. But I am very, very curious how this is going to work out for both teams. Huberdeau was one of the best players on that Florida Panthers roster. He's been a long-time Panther. He had, I think, the most assists for a left winger last year, or some strange stat like that. But he had a fantastic season, and Matthew Tkachuk also had an absolutely fantastic season, but he didn't want to re-sign with the Calgary Flames when his deal was up next year, so they decided to trade him, get it out of the way so they didn't lose him like one of their other star players, which we'll get to with the signings. So they pulled out this massive blockbuster trade, and I am just so curious how this is going to work out, how Kachuk's game is going to translate to the Panthers, how Huberdeau's game is going to translate to the Flames. I guess he will be playing with maybe their other top center that they signed this offseason, which we will get to. I guess I'll stop teasing that a bit and finish out these last two trades so we can get to the signings. So Calgary also sent Sean Monahan to the Montreal Canadiens along with a 2025 conditional first round pick for future considerations. And when it comes to the conditions on this pick, they are about a mile long and not even worth going over. We'll just have to see how it plays out, because I couldn't make sense of it just reading it all. There are so many conditions on this pick. If you are interested, definitely go look it up. You can see it on Cap Friendly. They have the whole thing, but it's preposterous. So Sean Monahan goes to the Montreal Canadiens along with a pick at some point for future considerations. And last but not least, to shore up some goaltending in Vegas, they acquired Adin Hill from the San Jose Sharks for a 4th round pick in 2024. It's kind of a smaller trade, but it is interesting because of Vegas's goalie situation, again with Robin Lehner missing the entire season due to that surgery. Logan Thompson starting the year as the number 1 goaltender, so they go out and get Adin Hill from San Jose. And I know I'm running a bit low on time here, but I do want to go over some of these signings, so it may go a few minutes long. I apologize in advance. It's happy hour plus, I guess. There's just been a lot that happened this offseason, and I want to get caught up and catch you guys up. So saying that, we will jump to these signings now, and I will try to go through them as quickly as I can. But Marc-Andre Fleury re-signed in Minnesota for 2 years at $3.5 million per season. And in Pittsburgh, they re-signed Chris Letang for 6 years with an AAV of $6.1 million. That contract takes him until he is 41. Of course, the 2 major free agents for the Pittsburgh Penguins this offseason being Chris Letang and Evgeny Malkin. They got Chris Letang signed pretty early in the offseason there, and I'll go over what happened with the other guy here in a little bit. But up next, the LA Kings re-signed Adrian Kempe to a 4-year deal at $5.5 million per season. Philip Forsberg re-signed in Nashville for 8 years at $8.5 million per season. Everybody was wondering if he would re-sign there, if he would go somewhere else. They got it done, and it is a big old contract. 8 years, $8.5 million per. He got paid. Next up, Alexander Georgiev, of course, traded from the New York Rangers to the Colorado Avalanche. Signed a 3-year deal with Colorado worth $3.4 million per season. So they shored up their goaltending for kind of a cheaper number than what they would have spent to keep Darcy Kemper. Rickard Rakell re-signed in Pittsburgh 6 years at $5 million per season. A nice big old contract for him. And then Colorado, man, this contract. 8 years, $6.125 million per season for Valeri Nichushkin. The man got paid, and I know he was so important during the Cup run this past year. He was great for the Avalanche in the playoffs, but that is a contract that maybe they will come to regret a little bit. Hopefully they don't. Hopefully it works out for the entire 8 years, or they're able to move it or something like that. But that is a contract. which brings me back to Pittsburgh and Evgeny Malkin. He re-signed there in Pittsburgh after so much talk about him potentially testing free agency, going somewhere else, but he re-signed with the Penguins, 4 years, $6.1 million per season, which is the same AAV or cap hit as Chris Letang. Eric Chernak, Anthony Cirelli, Mikhail Sergachev, they all signed extensions with the Tampa Bay Lightning, all 8-year extensions, all for different money. Eric Chernak at $5.2 million per season, Cirelli at $6.25, and Mikhail Sergachev at $8.5 million per season. So Tampa was sure to lock those guys up. When it comes to Detroit, so like I said, they made some big moves this offseason. They signed Andrew Kopp to a 5-year deal with a cap hit of $5.625 million. He had a very strong playoffs with the New York Rangers after being traded from the Winnipeg Jets. And again, the man got paid by Detroit. They also went out and got David Perron from the St. Louis Blues. He signed a 2-year contract with Detroit with a cap hit of $4.75 million per season. And Detroit makes the 6th team he will have played for. But before this offseason, he has only ever signed contracts with the St. Louis Blues. This is the first contract in the NHL he has signed with a different NHL team than the St. Louis Blues, yet they are going to be his 6th NHL team, which is just a really funny stat. He's been traded. He went to Vegas. I don't know if that was in the expansion draft or they traded him there. I think it might have been the expansion draft, but that's just a funny little stat to have. A painful contract. Jack Campbell goes to the Edmonton Oilers from the Toronto Maple Leafs. 5 years, $5 million per. That is a great deal for Jack. I'm happy for him. I wish it wasn't Edmonton, but it is what it is. 2 cup winners from Colorado on the move. Andrei Burakovsky to Seattle for 5 years with a contract worth $5.5 million per season. And Darcy Kemper goes to Washington for 5 years at $5.25 per season. And then one of the bigger contracts in free agency, Johnny Gaudreau changes teams. He goes from the Calgary Flames to the Columbus Blue Jackets. That's why they needed to free up cap space, because they signed him for 7 years at $9.75 million per season. Dylan Strome, he found a new home outside of Chicago since they did not tender him a qualifying offer. He signed 1 year in Washington for $3.5 million. So hoping for the best for him, of course. Andre Palat leaves Tampa and goes to New Jersey. 5 years, $6 million per season. That is a great contract, and I can't wait to see what he provides that Devils team. Josh Norris re-signed with Ottawa, a big old deal, 8 years, $7.95 million per season. Let's see here. Patrick Laine re-signed with Columbus, 4 years, $8.7 million per season, which is a big deal. Nobody knew if he was going to stay around in Columbus, but he did. I'm sure maybe Johnny Gaudreau signing there kind of encouraged him to stick around, but hopefully that starts a trend of people staying in Columbus, because it's an awesome city and Nationwide is a cool arena, and I don't know why people talk so negatively about Columbus, but hopefully this turns the tide for them a bit. The Matthew Tkachuk deal, going back to that sign-in trade, he signed a contract with the Calgary Flames for 8 years at $9.5 million. Of course, that was so they could trade him to the Florida Panthers with a guaranteed contract. That is a big old deal. Calgary was not done, though. They re-signed Oliver Shillington and Andrew Mangiapane Shillington for 2 years at $2.5 million per season. Mangiapane at 3 years, $5.8 million per season. Patrice Bergeron. People were wondering what he was going to do this offseason. Was he done? Was he going to come back to Boston? Of course he comes back to Boston. 1 year, $2.5 million. That is an absolute steal for Patrice Bergeron. Just madness. Lawson Krause re-signed with Arizona. The Arizona Coyotes, 5 years, $4.3 million per season. So he is going to see them through their whole tenure with Arizona State University. Lawson Krause, gotta hand it to him. That's a brave kid right there. I hope it works out. I am very intrigued to watch games this year when they play at Arizona State. But good for Lawson. Got paid while sticking with his team. David Krejci comes back to the NHL, comes back to Boston. 1 year, $1 million. He spent the 21-22 season playing in Czechia, but he played on a line with Pasternak at the World Championship and said that was one of the big factors in his decision to come back to the NHL, and the only team he was interested in was Boston. They had interest in him as well. He wanted to play with Pasternak some more, play with Bergeron again, so David Krejci is back after taking a year away from the NHL to go play in his homeland of Czechia. And then the big contract everybody was waiting for this offseason, Nazem Kadri. He leaves the Colorado Avalanche, sadly, but Nazem Kadri is a Stanley Cup champion, and he goes to the Calgary Flames. 7 years, $7 million per season. Perhaps that is the center that Jonathan Huberdeau will be playing with. We shall see. That is a big deal for Naz, a big deal for Calgary, and they kind of get some of that talent back that they lost with Johnny Gaudreau leaving and Matthew Tkachuk leaving. Now they have Nazem Kadri and Jonathan Huberdeau, so it worked out pretty well for Calgary there. Tage Thompson signed a whopper of a deal with Buffalo. 7 years, $7.142 million per season. That kicks in next year as it's an extension. But he had a great year with the Buffalo Sabres this year, and he cashed in on it. And if I were him, I would have done the same thing. Don't take the gamble and play out another year. Perhaps you get injured. Perhaps you have a down year. He capitalized off of that great year with Buffalo and got a monster contract. Jake Ottinger also re-signed with his team, the Dallas Stars. Of course, he took over in the playoffs as their number one goaltender and stole the show in Game 7 against the Calgary Flames. Didn't get the win, but made 60-something saves, I want to say, and was definitely the player of the game. But he is now the bona fide number one in Dallas. 3 years, $4 million per season. Great deal for Jake Ottinger, and I hope the best for him going forward. Tim Stützle signed an extension with the Ottawa Senators. It kicks in next year. 8 years, $8.35 million per season. Jordan Kyrou signed an extension with St. Louis, also kicks in next year. 8 years, $8.125 million per season. The kids wanted to get paid. The kids are getting paid, and you can't blame them. Great deals for those guys. Fantastic players. Hopefully it works out for them and their teams. And Kirby Dach, after being traded from the Chicago Blackhawks to the Montreal Canadiens, signed for 4 years, $3.362 million per season. I am so happy for Kerbs. I really hope he has a great season with Montreal. Like I said, people gave up on him just too quickly, and it wasn't his fault. He never really got a fair shake here in Chicago. So I hope in Montreal it's different. I hope that the fans treat him nicely and root for him to have the most success, and I hope it really goes well for him. Now, to briefly touch on some of the interesting signings, since I did tease that, I won't spend a whole lot of time here, but Stefan Noesen resigns in Carolina. He was a big part of the Calder Cup winning team in Chicago with the Chicago Wolves, so perhaps he goes back to the American League, or maybe he makes the jump to the Hurricanes. We shall see. Alexander Nylander re-signed in Pittsburgh for 1 year. Of course, the Chicago Blackhawks traded him to Pittsburgh for Sam Lafferty, and he re-signs there in Pittsburgh. Lafferty re-signed here in Chicago. Seemed to work out for both teams pretty well. Vinny Hinostroza has found a home in Buffalo. He signed there last season and then re-signed with them this offseason, 1 year and $1.7 million, so good for Vinny. I hope that he is happy, along with Malcolm Subban, also traded to the Buffalo Sabres by Chicago and re-signed there this offseason. Nicholas Aube-Kubel signed with the Toronto Maple Leafs, 1 year, $1 million, of course leaving the cup-winning team in Colorado. And I just hope that he doesn't bring another curse to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that being that the Stanley Cup is angry at him for denting it on the ice before the team picture, before they could even fully celebrate with it. He was denting it. So hopefully it's not like Toronto needs to be cursed any more than they already are. Maybe he will score the Stanley Cup winning goal for the Toronto Maple Leafs in 2023. We shall see. Capo Caco re-signed with the New York Rangers 2 years, $2.1 million per season. And Caleb Jones and Philip Kurashev re-signed here in Chicago, both 1-year deals. Caleb getting $1.35 million this season. Kurashev getting $750,000 this season. Jack Johnson also signed with the Chicago Blackhawks, coming from the Stanley Cup champs Colorado Avalanche. He signed for 1 year at $950,000. Somebody's got to play on defense, I guess, and they chose Jack Johnson, who scored, I believe, 1 goal last season, and it was in the season opener against the Blackhawks. So we can expect an own goal from him against the team this year. I'm just going to mark that down here. And then maybe the most interesting, Phil Kessel, signing a 1-year deal with the Vegas Golden Knights worth $1.5 million. He still has his Iron Man streak going, and he can take over that number 1 spot this season if he stays healthy. The only thing that worries me is he's signing with Vegas, and Vegas has very bad luck with injuries. So I am hoping that Kessel can stay healthy and keep that streak going, take over the number 1 spot. But we will see, I suppose. I hate that he went to Vegas. I love Phil. I can't root for the Vegas Golden Knights, but I hope for personal success for him. And that's where I'm going to cut this episode off. Again, like I said, a lot happened this offseason. There has been a lot of player movement, be it trades or players signing with different teams. The roster for your favorite team is probably going to look a lot different next season. I know mine will. Be it the Toronto Maple Leafs or the Chicago Blackhawks. There's been a lot of movement this offseason. Of course, if you want to see everything that went down, things that I didn't talk about here on this episode, just go over to capfriendly.com. They do a fantastic job and have everything listed. But yeah, now we are all caught up on the off-season. We can kind of put the off-season here behind us and move forward, talking about the rookie showcases, talking about training camp opening next week, and really get hyped up for the start of the 2022-23 NHL season and American Hockey League season with the Ice Hogs. So I hope you all are prepared for that. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Happy Hour. I know there was a lot of information thrown into this one, but I hope that some of these little tidbits here and there kind of sparked your memory of, oh yeah, that move happened, or that signing happened, something like that, because while I was going through the list, that's what kept happening to me. But I am back. The happy hours are back. The cozy casts will be back on Mondays. I'm looking forward to talking to all of you guys and sitting here doing these podcast episodes again. So that is it for this Friday installment of the From Center Ice Happy Hour. I hope all of you have a wonderful weekend. It's still summer, so get outside if you have some good weather. Still do some relaxing. It's not the NHL season yet. No need to be all stressed out and anxiety-ridden about your team just yet, because no matter who you root for, they will provide plenty of that during the actual season. So with that, I am heading off to edit this episode and then get ready to watch the rookie game tonight between the Blackhawks and the Minnesota Wild. It probably won't be up in time before that game starts, but the second game is Sunday at 1 p.m. Of course, you can also follow along where I will be talking about it on Twitter at VFCenterIcePod over there. So connect with us on all social media. Go to FromCenterIce.com where there's links to everything. And we have a merch store now, FromCenterIce.shop. That's as easy as it gets. The link for that will be in the show notes or in the description. And I will catch you all either in a video, perhaps, about the Rookie Showcase. Otherwise, I will catch y'all on Monday for the Cozy Cast. And I will see you guys then. Again, have a fantastic weekend. And with that, I am out. Bye, guys.